Welcome in, Ravens flock. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and today we're going to be previewing what is without a doubt the most heavily anticipated game of the season as the Ravens travel to San Francisco to take on the NFC's best team, the 49ers. You won't get a more heavyweight matchup in the regular season than this. Both teams are the top seed in their conference, both have an MVP candidate at quarterback, and both boast a top 10 offense and defense. This is a perfect matchup for the NFL Network as well as the fans of both teams. But enough of the preamble. Let's break down how each one of these number one teams can beat the other and end up being the only team in the NFL sitting at 12-3. Let's get to it.
They're going to get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that. I'm a Raven. It's on. All year. Every year.
With the Ravens coming into this game after their fourth straight win, and San Fran after its sixth straight, it's fair to say that both of these teams are entering this game as hot as possible at this point in the season. But why is that? Well, we're going to take a look at the numbers and see if we can find out why each of these teams are playing some of their best football right now. But before we do, please go ahead and tap that like button. It helps me out a lot. And also consider subscribing while you're at it. Anyway, back to football. As this is the Ravens channel, I want to be courteous to the 49ers fans that might be watching this. So we'll start by taking a look at the numbers and rankings for the 49ers offensive unit. While there are many metrics to grade success, I only have up here what I believe to be the most impressive and important categories for showing the potency of this offense. It's not hard to see why they have the most overall yards in the league, as they have the second most passing and the second most rushing yards. Christian McCaffrey has nearly 1,800 yards of scrimmage by himself, including 1,300 from rushing the ball and over 500 receiving. One of the other dual threats on this offense is Deebo Samuel, who accounts for nearly 1,000 yards from scrimmage, as well as 11 total touchdowns between receiving and rushing. Put that together with McCaffrey's 20 combined touchdowns, and you'll get to see why this team has 52 total touchdowns. Between rushing and receiving, it's a straight-up fact that this offense knows how to move the ball and score with it. The Ravens' offense is not far behind them in rankings, but it is a little more lopsided when it comes to how they move the ball and how they score touchdowns. While Lamar is well on pace to surpass his highest number of pass attempts, completions, and passing yards, it still cannot be denied that the Ravens run the ball more often and better than any other team in the NFL. The question for the Ravens' rushing attack now is, with Keaton Mitchell injured for the rest of the season, how is this committee of running backs featuring Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and Melvin Gordon going to respond? While the stable of running backs that Baltimore had is still a very good unit, the loss of Mitchell cannot be understated and will test the Ravens' offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, on his ingenuity and creativity to keep this rushing attack at the head of the NFL and the Ravens' offense. The San Francisco 49er offense was absolutely dominant over their 6-game win streak, which is why I believe the Ravens are going up against the NFL's best team, and I don't think that's an unreasonable statement to make. Every single game was at least a 2-score win or more, and the 49ers offense had over 400 yards in every single one of those games. 4 out of the 6 teams they faced were a 500 or better team record-wise before the game. The defense was also firing on all cylinders during this win streak, allowing only one opponent to go over 400 yards. But those 234 rushing yards by Arizona last week is concerning for this 49er defense, as it's set to take on the best in the business when it comes to running the ball. In fact, the 49ers, who are usually very good at stopping the run this season, holding teams this season to just 89.4 yards per game, the number unfortunately spikes to 111.6 yards per game against AFC North teams. Cincinnati went for 134 and Cleveland racked up 160. By comparison, the Ravens during their 4-game win streak may not have looked as dominant as the 49ers during their 6-game win streak. If you just look at the box scores and stats, you might agree with that statement. But this is why it's so important to actually watch how the Ravens have been winning their games. Because other than the Rams game, which Baltimore won in overtime after putting up 37 points on a Rams defense that hadn't allowed over 20 points in over a month, the Ravens were in control of every single one of those games that they played during that 4-game win streak. The Ravens defense was also in control of these games for the most part, but especially in the second half of most of these games. The Ravens defense this season has been one of the best, if not the best, at halftime adjustments in the league. So while we're on the topic of defense, let's talk about them for both teams, as they're both one of the best in the NFL. As with before, we're going to start with the 49ers to be polite to our guest viewers. We'll be looking at the same stats as we did for the offense for consistency's sake. And that's going to show you why this 49ers team is a top 5 unit in almost all these categories as well, with the exception of passing yards allowed. Having said that, they're still in the top half of the league, so it's not even as though they're bad at that. It's just simply not their best area of defense. What makes this defense so difficult to combat from a play calling aspect is that they're third best at stopping the run. So you may say, okay, let's just try to throw it on them. And oops, they're the first in the league in interceptions as well. So what do you do now? The Ravens defense has been dominant all season and is being compared to legendary defenses from the past, including the historic Ravens defense from their 2000 Super Bowl season. They've held all but one of their opponents to under 400 yards of offense. They've also had 6 games holding teams to 10 points or less, while only having 4 games where opponents score more than 23 points. And in all 4 of those games, the Ravens are 3-1. They allow the fewest points in the league, the fewest touchdowns, both in passing and rushing, and they're top 10 in almost every other category that's ranked. The Ravens defense also dominates opponents' offenses by being the leader in sacks with 50, as well as having the 5th lowest third down percentage allowed and the 2nd lowest red zone scoring percentage, with only 15 touchdowns on 40 trips into the red zone for opposing offenses. I'm so excited for this game, you guys, and I'm sure you are too, and a lot of that excitement for me comes from the anticipation of seeing the individual performances by some of the best players in the NFL, which happen to be on both of these teams. Let's talk real quick about some of the most exciting matchups that we could see during this game, starting with the Ravens offense versus the 49ers defense. Now, Lamar is having a career year in several statistical categories, as I mentioned earlier: completion percentage, passing yards, both passing attempts and completions, as well as yards after the catch. Lamar also leads the team in rushing currently with 741 yards, averaging 53 yards per game on the ground, in addition to his 221 through the air. Well, there's no clear-cut opponent for Lamar to face off with. I don't know if you guys could hear my air quotes. I do think that Fred Warner is going to have a large impact on several aspects of Lamar's performance. Not only does he lead the team in tackles with 116, he also has 4 interceptions, 9 passes defended, 4 forced fumbles, and 2.5 sacks. So basically, he does it all. And that's not surprising when even Roquan Smith was singing his praises only a few days ago, saying he was a top 3 linebacker in the league, up there with Bobby Wagner and, of course, Smith himself. Before the usage of Mitchell, Gus was, and now is again, the workhorse in this backfield. Before Mitchell got so many touches, Gus was on pace to go over 1,000 yards. That being said, at 663 yards, he's only 60 yards away from having a career high, so that's still a very likely possibility. To say he's having a career year in scoring touchdowns would be a laughable understatement. He's had 13 touchdowns through his first 4 years of his career, 6 in 1 year being the single season high. He currently has 11 so far in 2023, with 3 more games to add to that. I would expect that Dre Greenlaw will pose a challenge to Gus between the tackles, as well as if he tries to bounce it outside. Being second on the team in tackles with 5 tackles for loss on the season, as well as showing the speed and physicality that it requires to take on the type of runner that Edwards is, he will need to do his best to get to Gus early, preferably for him before Gus gets up to speed, as if not, we may see Greenlaw becoming a passenger on the Gus bus. Now, Zay Flowers leads this team in both receptions and yards, and he's going to continue to be the focal point of this offense on Monday night. As I stated in Lamar's breakdown, it's been a career year for him in regards to yards after the catch, and a large portion of that amount comes from Flowers. Zay has 680 total receiving yards, and 299 of those have come after the catch. Now, while wide receivers and cornerbacks don't usually match up one-on-one for the entire game, I would expect to see a healthy dose of Charvarius Ward covering Flowers as the 49's number 1 cornerback. While he has 4 interceptions on the year, last week he was absolutely lights out. 1 completion allowed on 5 targets, 15 total yards, and 14 of those were through the air. 0 missed tackles, which he only has 3 on the season. And what else? Oh, yeah, 2 interceptions, one of which he returned for 66 yards and a touchdown. Lamar's going to need to be on his toes and smart with the ball. This defense leads the league in interceptions, and Ward is playing extremely well right now. Now, Ronnie Stanley has had an up-and-down season protecting Lamar's blindside, and if you ask most Ravens fans, it's been more down than up. Now, I can't disagree with that viewpoint, despite my knowledge that he's not fully healthy. That being said, the matchup between Ronnie and really any pass rusher is going to be an extreme focal point for this game, especially if Nick Bosa is thrown into that equation, which he will be. The Ravens have used a rotation of tackles over the last 2 games, and it's seemed effective at times, but at others, it seems to put the O-line on the back foot to start drives. With Bosa already having 10.5 sacks on the season, as well as 2 forced fumbles, the Ravens really need to make sure that they have the best 5 guys lined up to protect Lamar, lest Bosa have a game like he did in Week 10 against Jacksonville. Now for the opposite side of the coin, we have the matchups to look out for between the 49ers offense and the Ravens defense. First on the list, of course, is going to be 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy. We already mentioned that he's second in the league in passing yards. He's also second in the league with only 7 interceptions on the year, which he's actually tied with Lamar for that. He does own the passing touchdown number 1 spot with 29, as well as the best passer rating at 119. But versus the Ravens on Monday night, Purdy is going to need to have a more important stat than the one listed above, and that is how quickly he can get the ball out of his hands, because coming after him right up the middle is going to be Justin Madubuike. The year that Madubuike is having for the Ravens can best be described by the nickname that he's been given, Baby Aaron Donald, as most of the time he has quarterbacks running for their life, which Purdy will be doing, but he'll need his line to protect him all game against the likes of Justin and this Ravens pass rush. Now, Christian McCaffrey is the other potential MVP candidate on this team, and it's easy to see why, as he leads the league in both rushing yards and overall yards from scrimmage. He's eclipsed 100 rushing yards in 6 games this year, and including receiving with his rushing, he has 5 games with at least 2 touchdowns. His best coming in the first matchup that they had against Arizona, where he had 3 rushing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown. While I personally believe that the phrase iron sharpens iron is a bit overused in the NFL, it certainly does apply to the matchup that we're about to go over. As Christian McCaffrey may be the perfect sword for the 49ers offense, he's going to be clashing against the Ravens' perfect shield in Roquan Smith. In addition to leading the team in tackles and being the heart and soul of this defense, Smith wears the green dot on his helmet, meaning he's in charge of getting the play call to everybody, making sure everybody's lined up. However, no matter the alignment or the assignment, Roquan Smith always seems to find himself either making the tackle or assisting in it. As McCaffrey makes plays all over the field and can get the ball anywhere on the field, expect Agent Zero to be following and all over the field as well. Now, Deebo Samuel may not have the most receiving yards on the team, nor the most touchdowns. He may even be getting a bit overshadowed by Brandon Ayuk, who's having a fantastic season with already over 1,000 yards. So don't take this as me belittling Ayuk's accomplishments this season, as he very well may be the larger threat of these two in this game. However, Deebo's ability in space with the ball in his hands is far more threatening to me, and I believe it's more threatening to the Ravens' defense. For the Ravens last week, Marlon Humphrey stepped up after having a down game against the Rams in the previous week. If we want to limit the receiving core of the 49ers, and especially Deebo Samuel, Marlon Humphrey is going to have another great performance alongside Brandon Stevens. Marlon might not be the interception king, but where he excels is in physical press coverage, bullying wide receivers, knocking them out of rhythm, and disrupting their timing with the quarterback on their routes. And all of this is connected. Because look at it this way, if Samuels can get open early, he's not disrupted on his routes, Purdy gets the ball out quickly, which means guys like Madubuike won't have time to get to him. The opposite is also in play. If Purdy can't get the ball out to Deebo on time because he's being disrupted by Marlon's physicality, pass rushers are going to get there and they're going to have a better opportunity to put Purdy down for a sack. Now, for the last matchup, the reason I have Kittle and Hamilton on this is not because of Kittle's receiving abilities nor Hamilton's coverage abilities, though both obviously possess those abilities in spades, and we might see them match up in that capacity as well. My focus will be to see if Purdy is getting pressured, will Kittle, who's an excellent blocker as we know, be used as such? This in turn will make it harder for the Ravens to get to him quickly. Therefore, we might see Kyle Hamilton, who is shown to be an excellent blitzer and very disruptive in the backfield, utilized to add an additional pass rush and pressure if Kittle stays in as a blocker. Now, what does each of these teams do that could pose the biggest threat to the other, in my humble opinion? For the Ravens, the 49ers pose the threat of having a fantastic wide receiving core along with George Kittle as a receiving threat to really test how good this secondary is, which has been slightly exposed at times during the season. Christian McCaffrey, however, is by far the biggest threat to me that I see for the Ravens defense. Other than Derrick Henry, he's the most dangerous back that the Ravens have faced this season. He can go right up the middle, out to the side, go out for a pass. He's going to need to be the top priority for this Ravens defense to stop the 49ers offense and make them one-dimensional. From the defensive side of things, the Ravens have not been great at protecting Lamar in the pocket this season. Lamar has to make more than a few truly incredible escapes and buy time for himself, typically on his own, seemingly every game, with Nick Bosa lurking on the line, as well as other players that can get after the quarterback. This offensive line is going to have to step up its game in protecting Lamar and give him better time to throw, as well as opening up running lanes. For the 49ers, the last time they faced a team that could be considered a number one defense was the Browns. And that Browns team was led by PJ Walker, who, newsflash, is not Lamar Jackson. So, what do you think a quarterback like Lamar Jackson with an elite arm and video game level agility in the run can do against this 49ers defense? If you can't get him on the first pass rush, he'll make a throw down the field. And what if he escapes the pocket? He gets by the only guy that's in front of him. How do you bring him down in the open field? Speaking of getting to the quarterback, Purdy hasn't been sacked nearly as much as Lamar, due in large part to Trent Williams being probably the best left tackle in the league. But you're now going up against the best sack defense in the NFL, where everyone on the line has multiple sacks. You've got guys like Jadeveon Clowney with 7.5, Odafe Oweh with 4, Kyle Van Noy with 6, who can come at you from multiple angles or right up the middle from the likes of Travis Jones, Michael Pierce, or Justin Madubuike, who we brought up earlier. He leads this team as well as all defensive interior linemen in sacks with 12. If it hasn't become clear at this point how epic of a battle these teams are about to have and how excited I am and you should be for it, then I haven't done my job. These are two super talented teams with potent offenses, elite defenses, and successful coaches. But at the end of the day, as they say in Highlander, there can only be one. This 49ers team, who I have felt, if they would have won the Super Bowl last year if they could have stayed healthy, are even better this year. But so are the Ravens, who have a better offense than last year, a better defense, and a healthy Lamar Jackson, who is playing at an MVP level. Now, I know I may sound like a homer, and maybe I am, but I do believe in the Ravens, especially when they're underdogs in prime time. So I say the Ravens win it 35-24 in a game that's closer than the score looks, but the Ravens are such a good second half team, I think they prevail in this Christmas matchup. Anyway, I want to hear from you guys. What do you think the final score will be? Do you think I'm wrong? Give me your scores in the comment section below.